Your bedtime was once a matter of law. In the medieval town, a web of strange statutes dictated everything from the clothes on your back to the very bread you could buy. This was not a world of random control, but a society using specific laws to fight chaos, enforce class, and simply survive. By the end of this journey, you will understand the hidden logic that turned daily life into a legal minefield. We will uncover why you could be fined for the color of your cloak, how your fireplace could land you in the stocks, and who decided the exact width of a loaf of bread. This exploration reveals the surprising priorities of an entire civilization. What do you think was their greatest fear? This complex web of authority meant your legal standing could shift the moment you crossed a town's boundary. While a king's decree might echo across the land, the true weight of the law was felt through the local bylaws crafted by town councils. These councils were preoccupied with three constant threats: fire, disease, and disorder. Their regulations were not born from whimsy, but from a desperate need to control an environment perpetually on the brink of chaos. Imagine a world built largely of wood and thatch, where a single overturned candle could erase an entire neighborhood by morning. In such a world, your very fireplace became a matter of public safety. The threat of pestilence hung equally heavy in the air, in crowded, unsanitary streets where waste often flowed openly. A single illness could sweep through a population with terrifying speed. And underpinning it all was the rigid social hierarchy, a world where your place was supposed to be fixed and visible. The enforcement of this intricate legal patchwork fell to a handful of watchmen, and most effectively to the community itself. Your neighbors were not just the people next door, they were the eyes and ears of the law, encouraged to report any infraction. This system of communal surveillance and public shaming, in the stocks or the pillory, was a powerful deterrent in a society where reputation was everything. With this foundation of practical fears and social control firmly in mind, the seemingly bizarre rules that governed every waking moment begin to reveal their own stark logic. The deep, resonant toll of the curfew bell was the sound of the law itself descending upon the town. As its final echoes faded into the night, a profound transformation occurred. The bustling, noisy streets were to fall silent. Every citizen, from the wealthiest merchant to the humblest apprentice, was expected to be behind their own door. This was the law of the couvre-feu, a term literally meaning cover fire. In a world of timber and thatch, an unattended flame was a weapon of mass destruction. So as the bell rang, the primary duty of every householder was to bank their fire or smother it with a metal cover, a simple act that safeguarded the entire community from a fiery doom. But the law's purpose burned with two distinct fuels. The obvious one was the prevention of a catastrophic blaze that could erase a town in hours. The other, more subtle purpose was the absolute control of nighttime movement. Anyone caught outside after curfew without a sanctioned lantern and a written pass faced immediate consequences. A watchman's call could lead to a night in the stocks or a fine that could cripple a laborer's family for weeks. This enforced collective bedtime was not about personal comfort. It was about ensuring a disciplined, rested workforce was ready at dawn and that the shadows held no opportunity for crime or conspiracy. The curfew effectively erased the night, prioritizing the safety and order of the whole over the freedom of the individual. This obsession with visible, public order did not stop when the sun rose, however. It extended right down to the very clothes you were permitted to wear in the daylight. Your social rank was stitched into the very fabric of your clothes. In the morning light, as you dressed for the day, you were not simply choosing an outfit. You were obeying a complex legal code designed to make your place in the world instantly visible to everyone you met. These were the sumptuary laws, a web of rules that dictated the materials, colors, and even the trim you were permitted to wear. The daughter of a prosperous merchant, for example, might gaze longingly at a bolt of fine silk, but the law forbade her from owning a dress made from it. That luxury was reserved for the countess living in the stone manor on the hill. A common laborer could not adorn his hat with a certain type of expensive fur, like ermine, a stark white fur reserved for the highest ranks of the nobility. Even the vibrant, expensive color purple was legally off-limits to anyone outside the royal family. The punishment for wearing above your station was both financially painful and deeply humiliating. You could face a heavy fine, and the coveted garment itself would be publicly confiscated and likely destroyed right in front of you. Town authorities claimed these laws were about promoting modesty and curbing sinful vanity, but their true purpose was far more practical. They were designed to protect the economic interests of the aristocracy by ensuring a ready market for their exclusive goods, and to prevent the rising merchant class from blurring the lines of a rigid social order. Your clothing was meant to be a walking, talking advertisement of your fixed place in life, and the law was the enforcer that made sure you did not falsely advertise. This legal obsession with controlling everyday life did not stop at your wardrobe. It extended right onto your dinner plate, governing the very bread you were allowed to buy. The price of your daily bread was a matter of law, not just commerce. For the vast majority of people in a medieval town, bread and ale were not simply food and drink. They were the very foundation of survival, constituting the bulk of their daily calories. The authorities understood that any instability in the price or quality of these staples could trigger riots or widespread starvation in a matter of days. To prevent this, they enacted a revolutionary form of consumer protection known as the Assize of bread and ale. This law was not a suggestion. It was a strict mathematical formula that tied the price, weight, and quality of a loaf of bread directly to the fluctuating price of grain. If the price of wheat rose, the baker was allowed to charge more, but he was also legally required to make his loaves smaller, ensuring the poor could still afford a basic unit of sustenance. The law demanded that the bread be made of pure, unadulterated grain, free from cheaper, inedible fillers like sand, chalk, or even ground-up nutshells that unscrupulous bakers might use to stretch their supply. The punishment for selling a fraudulent, underweight loaf was severe and intentionally humiliating. A baker caught cheating his customers could be dragged through the filthy streets on a wooden hurdle, with the offending loaf tied around his neck, or he could be locked in the pillory and have the bad bread burned beneath him. His entire stock could be forfeited to the local authorities. For the ale wives who brewed the town's beer, a beverage often safer to drink than the local water, the regulations were just as strict. They were required to publicly signal when a new, fresh batch was ready for sale by placing a long pole, called an ale stake, outside their door, inviting immediate inspection. Local officials would then test the ale's quality and measure its volume to ensure it met the legal standard. This entire system was a pragmatic, if harsh, acknowledgement that the free market could not be trusted with the most basic elements of life. The Assize placed the stability of the community above the potential profits of the individual baker or brewer. This obsession with fairness in the marketplace did not stop at food and drink, however. It extended to the very tools and measures used in every transaction. Your very right to sell your bread or ale was not a matter of personal choice. For the baker, the butcher, and the brewer, the law dictated the precise location of their livelihood. They were compelled to bring their goods to the official town market, a bustling, noisy square that served as the only legal heart of commerce. Setting up a private shop on a quiet side street or selling directly from your home kitchen was strictly forbidden. This mandatory market participation was a cornerstone of the medieval economy. By funneling all trade into one public space, town authorities could effectively monitor every transaction. Officials could easily inspect the quality of meat, ensure the weight of a loaf of bread, and check the strength of the ale, all under the watchful eyes of the entire community. This public scrutiny was a powerful deterrent against fraud. More importantly for the town's coffers, this system made it simple to collect taxes and tolls on every sale, directly funding the civic government. The law also prevented the rise of black markets that could undercut official prices and destabilize the community's food supply. For the average townsfolk, this meant knowing exactly where to go for essential goods, creating a predictable and centralized hub for daily life. A craftsman who defied this law and tried to operate outside the market faced the revocation of his hard-won trading rights or a fine so large it could destroy his business. This was not about convenience, it was about absolute control over the flow of money and goods, ensuring the town's survival and enriching its treasury. With every merchant and product concentrated in one place, the authorities could now focus on the fine details of how business was conducted, scrutinizing the very tools used to measure and sell. The stench of a medieval town was not merely an annoyance, it was a legal offense. In these cramped, crowded streets, the air itself could be a weapon, thick with the threat of disease. This is where the Law of Nuisance took hold, a powerful and flexible tool that made it illegal to create any condition offensive or dangerous to your neighbors. Imagine the complaints brought before the local court. One householder might testify against another for dumping their kitchen slops and refuse directly into the narrow lane, creating a foul, slippery mess that attracted rats. A more serious case could involve a prosperous tanner whose workshop reeked of the pungent animal urine and harsh chemicals used to cure hides. If his operation was situated too close to the homes of wealthier citizens, they could sue him for creating a nuisance, forcing him to move his business to the town's outskirts. Even the most basic necessity, the privy or cesspit, was subject to this law. A landlord who neglected to have his tenant's overflowing latrine cleaned could be fined for endangering the entire neighborhood's health. The punishment was typically a straightforward order to abate the nuisance, to clean up the mess or relocate the smelly enterprise, backed by the threat of a heavy fine for non-compliance. This was an early, pragmatic form of environmental and public health regulation. It acknowledged a radical idea for its time that one person's actions or inactions could negatively impact the well-being of the entire community. This sense of communal responsibility for shared spaces extended far beyond just managing smells and waste. It governed the very ground beneath your feet and the air above your head. The responsibility for a clean street literally stopped at your own front door. In a world without municipal garbage collectors, every homeowner and shopkeeper was legally bound to keep the public way directly in front of their property meticulously swept and free of refuse. You were required to pile the collected waste, a mix of animal dung, food scraps, and general filth, into a heap for collection. This was not a voluntary civic duty. Failure to maintain your small section of the town could earn you a substantial fine from the local authorities. But what happened to those piles of waste? In many towns, the answer lay with a unique official known as the Scavenger. This was not a mere trash collector. He was a businessman who purchased the exclusive right to gather the town's refuse. He would then sort through the mounds, salvaging anything of value. Old bones could be ground down for glue or fertilizer. Discarded rags were essential for the paper-making industry, and even certain types of ash had their uses. This rudimentary recycling system was a surprisingly effective way to manage urban waste, turning a public health problem into a private enterprise. It forced every citizen to participate in the fight against disease, creating a powerful sense of shared responsibility for the communal environment. This practical law ensured that the ground beneath your feet was as orderly as the authorities demanded the space above your head to be. The narrow street below was not the only space the law sought to control. Your gaze had to travel upward into a tangled forest of timber and signs. As towns grew more crowded, the only direction to build was outwards, creating the iconic medieval streetscape where the upper floors of houses jutted dramatically over the lower ones. These jetted buildings created a perpetual twilight at street level, but they also presented a clear and present danger. A loose timber from a top floor could crash down onto a crowded market. More terrifyingly, in a fire, these wooden overhangs acted like a fuse, allowing flames to leap effortlessly from one house to the next across the narrow alley. The law stepped in to dictate exactly how far a building could project over public land. A new house could not encroach more than a specified number of feet, sometimes no more than the length of a man's arm. This was not just about property lines, it was about preserving a slender strip of sky for light and air, and about carving out a crucial fire break in a city of kindling. The same logic of public passage applied to the vibrant, often chaotic, world of shop signs. A blacksmith might want an enormous, swinging iron horseshoe to announce his trade, while a tavern could dangle a heavy wooden barrel. But an over-ambitious sign could knock a rider from his horse or snag a passing cart. Regulations strictly limited the size and projection of these advertisements, ensuring the safe flow of people and goods. This was urban planning born from grim experience, a recognition that private ambition had to be tempered for public safety. This same meticulous concern for the community's well-being governed another vital resource: the water that quenched the town's thirst. The clear, cold water drawn from the common well was the town's lifeblood. Every single day, a procession of townsfolk would make their way to this central point, buckets in hand, for this was not merely a convenience, it was the primary source of drinking water for the entire community. Because this resource was so vital, its use was governed by a strict and sensible set of laws designed to protect it from contamination and conflict. You could not, for instance, take your laundry to the well and begin scrubbing soiled garments, as the soap and filth would immediately poison the water for everyone downstream. Watering your horse or your livestock directly from the well's basin was similarly forbidden, as animal waste could seep back into the supply. To prevent long, chaotic queues and arguments, some towns even regulated the times when different groups could collect water, perhaps assigning specific morning hours to the bakers who needed it for their dough and afternoons to the general households. The physical structure of the well itself was sacrosanct. Damaging the stonework, the winding mechanism, or the bucket was considered a serious crime against the entire town, punishable by heavy fines or even time in the stocks. To ensure these rules were followed, many communities appointed a well master, a trusted official tasked with daily maintenance and with the authority to chastise anyone who broke the water laws. These regulations were a perfect example of early common-sense resource management, acknowledging that the survival of all depended on the responsible behavior of each individual. This same principle of managing a shared, essential commodity applied with equal force to the wood and peat that kept the town warm. Your right to gather firewood was measured by the law, not by the depth of the winter chill. While the dense forests belonged to the local lord, many towns managed areas of common land where residents held ancient, traditional rights to collect resources. These rights, however, came with strict limitations known as Estovers. This legal term defined exactly how much wood a household could take, and more importantly, what kind. You were almost always restricted to gathering only deadfall, the dry branches already littering the forest floor, or to breaking off specific types of boughs from certain trees. The healthy, living tree, the very pillar of the woodland, was absolutely off limits. Chopping one down for your hearth was a serious crime. This was not merely a property law, it was an early and remarkably sophisticated form of conservation. The authorities understood a simple, brutal equation. If every family took a single healthy tree each season, the entire woodland would be gone in a few years, leaving the community without fuel, building materials, or the wild game that lived within the forest. A violator caught felling a live oak or beech tree faced harsh penalties, from heavy fines to public flogging, a punishment meant to deter everyone else from the same destructive path. This system of Estovers reveals a profound foresight, a conscious effort to balance the immediate, burning need for warmth against the long-term survival of the community itself. The law's meticulous attention to the management of essential resources extended from the forest right into the heat of the baker's oven. The glow of a baker's oven after dark was not a welcome sight, but a terrifying one. The law of the night baking ban was a direct and unambiguous response to the single greatest threat a medieval town faced: fire. In a community of closely packed, timber-framed buildings with roofs of dry thatch, a single spark from an unattended oven could doom hundreds. The logic was brutally simple. A baker working through the night was a tired baker, more likely to be careless with the hot embers needed to heat his massive brick oven. In the darkness, a stray spark could go unnoticed until it had already caught hold in the eaves of a neighboring house. By forcing all baking to be conducted in daylight hours, the town council ensured that the entire neighborhood was awake, alert, and could form a bucket brigade at the first sign of smoke. The penalty for breaking this law was devastating. A baker caught with a lit oven after curfew could have his entire livelihood, the oven itself, smashed to pieces by order of the court. This was not mere punishment, it was a powerful public demonstration meant to deter everyone else. The law acknowledged that one man's profit could never outweigh the safety of the entire community. And just as the law managed the risks posed by human industry, it also had to control the unpredictable nature of the animals living within the town's walls. A pig loose in the street was not just an animal out of place, it was a walking violation of the law. For many town families, keeping a single sow or a few chickens in a backyard sty was a crucial source of food, a small but vital buffer against hunger. Yet this private benefit came with a heavy dose of public responsibility. The greatest offender was the pig, a creature of immense appetites and surprising strength, notorious for breaking out of its pen to roam the narrow lane. An unchaperoned pig was a force of destruction, its powerful snout capable of rooting up vegetable gardens, overturning refuse piles, and churning the already muddy streets into a foul quagmire. To prevent this, the law demanded that all pigs be ringed, a practice where a metal ring was inserted through the sensitive cartilage of the animal's snout. This was not an act of cruelty but one of pure pragmatism. The ring made it painful for the pig to root, effectively disabling its primary tool for chaos. If your unringed or unpenned pig was caught wandering, the consequences were severe and immediate. You faced a substantial fine, a financial blow to any household. But the law went even further. In many towns, any citizen was legally entitled to kill a stray pig on sight, butchering the animal right there in the street. The meat might then be divided, with a portion going to the town authorities and another to the man who did the deed. This brutal statute transformed a neighbor's valuable property into a public hazard that anyone could eliminate, creating a powerful incentive for every pig owner to keep his animal securely contained. These regulations were a constant, messy negotiation between the individual's need to provide for their family and the community's need for basic sanitation and order. Just as the law sought to control the unpredictable nature of animals within the walls, it had to address the even more unpredictable nature of people when the sun went down. A knock on your door after dark was not a friendly visit. It was the sound of the law challenging your very reason for existing outside your home. Beyond the general curfew, many towns enforced a far more specific and menacing statute, the Prohibition of Nightwalking. This was not merely a charge of being out late, it was an accusation of intent. To be labeled a nightwalker was to be declared a person with no lawful purpose, a soul whose very presence in the shadows was presumed to be criminal. A watchman's lantern illuminating your face on a moonless street immediately placed the burden of proof upon you. Where are you going? Who are you meeting? Why are you not safely abed? Your answers had to satisfy a man trained to see guilt in the darkness. An honest but poorly explained errand, like fetching a midwife for a laboring wife, might be met with suspicion, while a mumbled excuse could mean a night in the stocks or worse. This law granted constables immense power, transforming the simple act of walking into a potential crime. It was a blunt instrument for crime prevention, rooted in the absolute belief that no good happened under the cover of night. For the sake of communal security, the law presumed every solitary figure was a threat until they could prove otherwise. This deep intrusion into personal liberty, into the right to simply move without explanation, reveals a society willing to sacrifice freedom for a perceived blanket of safety. That same desire to control potentially dangerous behavior extended from the shadowy streets into the full light of day, governing the very words that came out of your mouth. Even your private arguments were a matter of public record. In a world where walls were thin and neighbors lived practically on top of one another, a sharp tongue could be as disruptive as a drawn sword. The law recognized this with a specific charge being a common scold. This label was almost exclusively applied to women who were seen as habitually quarrelsome, spreading malicious gossip that poisoned the peace of the entire street. A woman who constantly berated her husband, loudly slandered a neighbor's reputation, or stirred up disputes between families was not just a nuisance, she was a criminal. Her words were seen as a direct attack on the communal harmony that held the fragile town society together. The punishment for this offense was designed not just to hurt, but to humiliate, transforming the offender into a public spectacle. One common device was the Scold's bridle, a terrifying metal head cage with a bit that pressed down on the tongue, physically preventing speech. Forced to wear this in the town square, a Scold was paraded before the very neighbors she had offended, her power to speak utterly nullified. An even more brutal punishment was the cucking stool. The offender was tied to a chair at the end of a long beam and repeatedly dunked into the filth of the village pond or the town's refuse-filled river. The shock of the cold, dirty water and the sheer public ridicule were meant to wash away her quarrelsome nature. These acts of ritualized shaming served a dual purpose: to break the spirit of the individual and to broadcast a stark warning to everyone else about the cost of disruptive speech. The law's goal was a silent, orderly streetscape where the only approved noise was the sound of productive labor. This obsession with controlling public behavior and maintaining a disciplined workforce meant that even the games people played in their rare moments of leisure fell under the law's stern gaze. Even your Sunday afternoon football match was a crime. The leather ball, the shouts of players, the spontaneous gathering of a crowd in a field just outside the town walls, all of it was an illegal act in the eyes of the law. Town councils repeatedly issued bans against games like football and dice, viewing them not as innocent fun but as direct threats to public order. A raucous football game, with its roots in chaotic village brawls where entire parishes would fight over a ball, often resulted in trampled gardens, broken windows, and bloody noses. More dangerously, these games were hotbeds for gambling. A laborer could lose a week's wages on a single roll of the dice, money his family desperately needed for bread, all while he was supposed to be attending a church service. The law specifically targeted Sundays and holy days for these bans, a time when idleness was seen as the devil's playground. The preferred alternative was not quiet contemplation, but the disciplined, rhythmic thwack of arrows hitting straw targets. Archery practice was not just permitted, it was legally mandated in many places. This was leisure with a purpose, a communal activity that doubled as vital military training, ensuring every able-bodied man could wield a longbow in the king's service. The ban on chaotic games was a clear attempt to mold the character of the community itself, promoting disciplined, productive pastimes over those that led to idleness, debt, and violence. It was a recognition that uncontrolled recreation could unravel the very fabric of a disciplined society. This meticulous control over how people spent their hours extended to the very measurement of time itself, where the law held a surprising and absolute authority. The rhythm of the entire town was not set by the sun, but by the bronze tongue of the church bell. In an age before personal clocks or pocket watches, these bells were the only public timepieces, their sound carving the day into precise, audible segments. The first peals at dawn called the faithful to morning prayer, while a different sequence of chimes signaled the official opening of the market. The same bell that announced the midday meal would later toll the curfew, commanding every citizen to cover their fires and retreat indoors. This was not merely a helpful service, it was a legally enforced system. The law strictly dictated who could pull the ropes and when, because the sound of the bells carried the full weight of civic authority. An unauthorized ring, a playful peal by a mischievous apprentice, or a bell rung at the wrong hour was not a simple prank. It was a serious criminal offense that could plunge the community into chaos. Imagine the confusion if a false bell sent bakers to their ovens hours early, or convinced the night watch that their shift was over while darkness still held the streets. This control over the auditory landscape gave both the church and the town council an immense power, the power to orchestrate the collective life of thousands with a single, resonant signal. The bell ringer himself was a crucial civic figure, a man entrusted with the literal timing of daily existence. This meticulous regulation of sound, of turning noise into official command, extended far beyond the church tower, reaching right down into the bustling, noisy marketplace. The price you paid for a sack of grain was not supposed to be the result of a secret deal struck in a country lane. Medieval authorities understood that for the market to function fairly, all goods had to reach the public square where their price could be set by open competition, not private manipulation. This principle was enforced with ruthless efficiency through laws against the crime of forestalling. A forestaller was a market saboteur. He would ride out from town before dawn, lurking on the roads leading to the market. When he spotted a farmer's cart laden with corn or a fishwife carrying her fresh catch, he would intercept them. Using high-pressure tactics, he would buy their entire supply at a low price, far from the eyes of the town officials. Then he would march that same cart right into the marketplace and sell the goods at a steep markup, pocketing the difference. He had created no value, grown no grain, caught no fish. His only contribution was to artificially inflate the price of bread and food for every person in the town. This was not seen as clever business. It was considered a form of economic treason. Two related offenses filled out this trifecta of trade crimes. Regrating was the act of buying something inside the market only to turn around and resell it in that same market later the same day at a higher price. An engrosser went even further, buying up such a huge portion of a single commodity like salt or wool that he could effectively control its supply and dictate its price to the entire community. The punishment for these crimes was severe because the crime itself was seen as an attack on the community's stomach. A convicted forestaller could be fined heavily, dragged to the pillory where rotten produce would be hurled at him, and stripped of his right to trade in the town ever again. These laws reveal a surprisingly sophisticated grasp of market forces and a fierce determination to place the well-being of the many above the profiteering of the few. This protective arm of the law even extended its reach to the very beams and stones used to build the town itself. The strength of your neighbor's house was a direct reflection of your own safety. These towns, built so closely together, could not tolerate a single weak structure, for a collapsing wall or a failing roof endangered everyone nearby. This is why the law stepped in to dictate the very bones of a building, setting standards for construction materials that seem remarkably modern in their intent. In some towns, the thickness of a thatch roof was legally specified, requiring a dense, tightly packed layer that would be less likely to catch a stray spark from a neighboring chimney. The type of wood used for crucial support beams was also a matter of public record, with regulations mandating strong, seasoned oak over softer, more flammable pine for key structural elements. But how could a town with no building inspectors possibly enforce such detailed codes? The answer lay in a powerful and ancient system known as the View of Frankpledge. This was not a casual neighborhood watch, it was a formal, periodic assembly, a legal gathering where a male representative from every single household was required to appear. Before the local magistrate, each man would swear a solemn oath to uphold the town's laws, and in doing so, he accepted a profound legal responsibility. He became an official eye for the community, obligated to report any building violations he witnessed. If your neighbor was using rotten timber for a new addition, or if you saw a household skimping on their roof thatch, you were legally bound to report it. Failure to do so could mean you shared in the fine and the blame if that faulty construction later caused a fire or collapse. This system transformed every citizen into a building inspector, creating a web of collective responsibility that was far more effective than any single official could ever be. It was a stark bargain, trading absolute personal privacy for a blanket of communal security. This deep-seated principle of collective accountability, where the many were responsible for the actions of the one, would be tested most severely in the aftermath of the most shocking of all crimes. Your neighbor's crime could empty your own purse. This was the stark reality of the tithing system, a legal framework that bound every man and boy over the age of 12 into a small group known as a tithing. Typically consisting of 10 or 12 men from the same village or urban neighborhood, this unit was not a social club. It was a legal chain gang of mutual responsibility. Each member stood as a personal guarantor for the lawful conduct of every other man in his group. If one man stole a loaf of bread and fled, the remaining 9 or 11 were held legally accountable. They were given a strict deadline to hunt down their fugitive neighbor and physically drag him before the court. Failure to do so resulted in a heavy collective fine levied against the entire tithing. This system, formerly known as Frankpledge, transformed law enforcement from a distant authority's job into an immediate, personal burden for every adult male. It forced a culture of intense, localized surveillance, where you had a direct financial incentive to know exactly what your neighbors were doing. A man known for a hot temper or a light finger was not just a nuisance, he was a direct threat to your family's economic stability. This created a powerful, peer-driven pressure to conform, making the community itself the primary enforcer of the law. The annual view of Frankpledge, the gathering where these groups were reviewed and oaths were sworn, was a solemn reaffirmation of this collective bargain, trading personal privacy for a measure of communal security. This intricate web of legal obligation did not end with monitoring your neighbors for crime. It extended into the very workplace, governing the relationship between a master craftsman and his young apprentice. The Black Death did more than fill the graves. It emptied the fields and workshops of the men needed to work them. For the first time in memory, a common laborer who survived the plague found himself in a position of power. He could demand higher wages from a lord desperate to harvest his crops, or a master craftsman anxious to fulfill a contract. This sudden shift in economic power terrified the ruling class, and their response was swift and brutal. The Statute of Laborers was a law designed to turn back time, to force wages back to their pre-plague levels, and to chain workers to their home parishes. A thatcher who knew his skills were in short supply could no longer travel to the next town to seek a better offer. He was legally bound to accept work at the old, lower rate from any employer who demanded it. The law even reached into the workshop to control apprenticeships, capping the fees a master could charge and limiting the years of service he could demand, all to ensure a steady flow of cheap, compliant labor. Enforcement was a constant struggle, with workers and employers alike finding ways to skirt the rules. But the statute's intent was crystal clear. It was the law used as a weapon against economic reality, a desperate attempt to legislate away the bargaining power of the survivors. This frantic effort to control the economic fallout of mass death found a strange and poignant parallel in laws that sought to govern the most personal of human experiences, the public expression of grief. The color of your mourning clothes was a matter of law, not just personal sorrow. In a society obsessed with visible status, even grief became a potential arena for social climbing, and the authorities moved to stamp it out. The same sumptuary laws that governed your wedding attire reached coldly into the realm of funerals, dictating the scale of your final farewell. A wealthy merchant, flush with success, could not legally host a funeral feast for hundreds of guests, nor could his widow wear a cloak of the most expensive black velvet for a full year. The law specified a maximum number of mourners, the permissible quality of cloth for mourning garments, and even the types of food that could be served at the funeral meal. In some towns, the very duration of public mourning was legally prescribed, cutting short the outward displays of a family's loss. The goal was to prevent a dangerous and bankrupting competition in grief, where one-upmanship in funeral pomp could drive a rival family into debt, all while threatening the carefully maintained social hierarchy. A funeral that too closely mimicked the solemn pomp of the local lord's burial was a direct challenge to the established order, a statement that money could buy the honors of birthright. By regulating death, the law sought to enforce a somber, moderated social harmony, ensuring that the hierarchy of the living remained undisturbed by the passions of the dead. This demonstrated the law's breathtaking ambition to control human expression from the cradle to the grave. Yet, in a final, fascinating twist, this same desire to control commerce and reputation gave birth to a concept that feels strikingly modern: the protection of a craftsman's unique work. A master craftsman's signature was not written in ink, but hammered into metal or carved into wood. In the fiercely competitive world of medieval trades, your reputation was your most valuable asset, and it was literally stamped onto every piece you sold. This was the system of guild marks, also known as touch marks or hallmarks. A silversmith, for instance, would strike his unique symbol onto a finished chalice, a public pledge that the piece contained the pure, promised amount of silver and was crafted to the guild's exacting standards. This tiny, embossed symbol transformed an anonymous object into a trusted product, telling the buyer exactly who stood behind the work. To steal that symbol was to steal the craftsman's hard-won honor. Using another man's mark was not a minor infraction, it was a profound fraud, a crime that could see you fined into poverty, publicly shamed, and permanently expelled from the guild that granted you the right to work in the town. But the protection did not stop at the surface of the finished product. The knowledge required to create that product was guarded just as fiercely. Guilds enacted strict, binding laws that forbade members from sharing their trade secrets with any outsider. A master glassblower could not teach his intricate techniques to a mason, nor could a master weaver reveal the formula for a prized die to someone who had not sworn the guild's oaths. This was an early, powerful form of intellectual property law. It recognized that a craft's specialized knowledge was a form of collective wealth, as vital to the community's economic health as a barrel of gold. By controlling this knowledge, the guilds accomplished three crucial goals. They maintained consistently high quality for the consumer. They protected their members from being undercut by cheap, poorly made imitations, and they preserved the exclusive livelihood of the families who had dedicated their lives to the craft. This was commerce regulated not by a distant king, but by the craftsmen themselves, who understood that trust was the ultimate currency. These 21 peculiar laws were not a random collection of absurdities. When you step back, they snap together into a coherent and logical picture, a desperate blueprint for survival. The medieval town was a fragile human experiment, a crowded pocket of humanity perpetually balanced on the edge of chaos. Its laws were the heavy-handed tools used to maintain that balance. Four overwhelming priorities guided every statute. The first and most urgent was public safety. In a town of wood and thatch, a single spark was a potential holocaust. The curfew and the night baking ban were not about controlling your schedule. They were about preventing a fire that could erase your entire world by morning. The second driving force was economic stability. The authorities knew that a hungry populace was a revolutionary one. The Assize of bread and ale and the ruthless prosecution of forestallers were not about micromanaging bakers. They were about guaranteeing that the poor could always afford a loaf of bread, preventing the riots that would inevitably follow a famine. The third pillar was the rigid enforcement of social hierarchy. In a world without photographs or identification papers, your clothes were your public identity card. The sumptuary laws that told a merchant's daughter she could not wear silk were not really about vanity. They were about ensuring that a wealthy commoner could never be mistaken for a member of the nobility, preserving a social order that everyone believed was divinely ordained. And finally, underpinning it all was a profound belief in collective responsibility. Your neighbor's actions were your business because his crime could lead to your fine under the tithing system, and his faulty chimney could burn down your house. The law made you your brother's keeper, for better or for worse. This was a world where the freedom of the individual was a concept that barely existed. Your rights were almost always subordinate to the needs of the community as a whole. Seen through this lens, these bizarre laws transform from historical curiosities into the very foundational pillars of medieval civic life, a stark and pragmatic code for keeping the darkness at bay. The echoes of the curfew bell and the baker's mark have not entirely faded from our modern world. These 21 peculiar statutes were far more than just a collection of local oddities. They formed a desperate, practical blueprint for survival in a society perpetually balanced on the edge of chaos. Each law, from the mandated fire cover to the regulated width of a loaf of bread, was a thread in a vast legal net designed to catch the town as it threatened to fall into disorder. We can see their legacy all around us today. The medieval Assize of bread, with its strict standards for weight and quality, is the direct ancestor of our modern food safety laws and consumer protection agencies. The Law of Nuisance, which forced a tanner to move his smelly workshop, laid the groundwork for our environmental health codes, and the meticulous rules about building projections and street cleaning were an early, gritty form of urban planning. Our ancestors were grappling with the same fundamental human needs we face today: the desire for safety, for fair dealing in the marketplace, for a clean and healthy community. They simply used the tools they had, crafting a system of control that seems alien to our modern sense of individual liberty. The next time you freely choose a colorful coat from your closet or take a late-night stroll simply for the pleasure of it, remember the medieval townsfolk for whom such simple acts were serious legal matters. Their world was built on a different bargain, one that traded personal freedom for collective security. If this journey into the legal mind of the past captivated you, please show your support by liking this video and subscribing for more explorations of the forgotten corners of history. I would love to hear your thoughts, so tell me in the comments, which of these 21 strange laws would you have found the most difficult to